Today I'm going to cover the mobility needed for the press to handstand, specifically around the hip movement, and I'm going to do it with the exercise, the swim through. Now, I'm not going to do the swim through as the main drill. I'm going to do that as the assessment or the end movement, if you like, for the mobility work for the press. So the swim through looks like this. Now I'm going to first demonstrate it. I'm totally cold, so I recommend that you do this as well. So we're going to just see where we're at with everything. So we have the forward fold or the pike position. So there with the legs together. Then I'm going to open up into straddle as best I can. Now ideally here, you would sweep the legs around, the legs would go around behind you and you'd end up laying on your front. I don't have the mobility, especially cold, to do that and just have the legs move around. I'm going to have to use a little bit of strength. So I'm going to open as wide as I can. There's my straddle position, and I'm just going to lift up using the hands. Then I'm going to just shift around, trying to keep the hips as low as possible, end up laying on my front. There. So if we look at that path, we're starting in this position, and then I'm sweeping the legs around the outside, ideally, and finish in that position. So exactly the same as the press handstand. So same thing, so pike position, sweep the legs around the outside, end up in your straight position. So see how all three of those are exactly the same thing. So that's the assessment. That's where we are, where we're cold. Now we want to have a look at where we can get to after some stretches. So I'm going to break it down into 3 different exercises. I'm going to do a forward fold, Jefferson curl type movement. I'm going to do a straddle stretch, and I'm going to do middle splits. So I'm only going to do one exercise for each of those. I'm going to take you through those, and then we're going to retest that swim through position, and then see how that affects our press handstand. So Jefferson curl is normally done standing. We roll through the spine first, soft knees, and then we straighten the legs at the bottom and go as deep as we can. Now, I'm pretty comfortable with this movement. I've done it lots of times before. I've done it weighted. So I'm going to spice it up a little bit. I'm going to raise the toes up. So this is going to wind the calves up, so the bottom first before I go into the movement. So it's a little bit more aggressive. I recommend if you haven't done it before, just work on, first of all, we'll be working on the floor, making sure that you can get to palms to the floor. So I'm going to roll down through the spine, lock the knees backwards, and then finish. Goal to be straight legs at the bottom. As soon as you touch the floor, grab yourself as a step, do the same thing. So the goal there is to lengthen the spine. That actually turns into a back stretch. So you're lengthening the spine when it straightens. Until then, it's going to be hamstrings and calves. You can then wind that up once you get used to that by adding load and progressively increasing the load. I don't go stupidly heavy with it. I just go around the 20 kilo mark. So to wind it up a little bit more, I'm going to elevate the feet. So specifically the toes. So I'm just going to use a step. I'm going to stick a couple of handstand blocks with the wood. So I'm going to do the same thing. It's a bit sketchy. Okay, so I'm set up there. So now I'm going to roll down through the spine, but now lengthen as best I can there, but it's winding the calves up much more. So I'm actively pulling down as much as I can into this position, and then I'm going to roll back out of it. Now this one I'm not bending my knees so much at the start. It's much harder to bend the knees when you've already wound up the calves. And I'm going to do 5 repetitions with like a 5-second pause at the bottom, and I'm going to pull aggressively. I'm actually grabbing hold of the steps at the bottom as well in that bottom position. So that's the Jefferson curl, the pike position done. So now my forward fold position is probably down to my normal depth. So next one is looking at the straddle position. If you're not comfortable in a straddle, just hang out in the position. I'd make sure you raise your hips up, raise your butt up on some cushions or some blocks or some weight plates, and just hang out in your straddle position, trying to keep the back as flat as possible. So it might be something like this. If you feel a bit more comfortable with it, do it loaded and do it lower to the floor. So here I'm going to do it with a 5K plate. I would normally go a little bit heavier if I had something with me. At home, I don't have those. And I'm going to load higher up. Now, if I had a heavier weight, I'd put it actually on the mid part of my back and just hold on to the lip of it and pull forwards as far as I can. So I'm going to do something similar here. It's just going to be a little bit higher up on my back. So there, I'm going to try and reach with the elbows as I do this. I'm just going to do 10 repetitions with a 30-second hold at the end. So up and down and reach as far as I can. That's 1. That's 2. That's 3. That's 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. Okay, and this one I'm going to hold. I'm going to try and balance the plate on my back. Okay, and then slowly come back out of there. Now we're going to go into the fun one, so the middle splits. Now with this one, I'm just going to do 2 different variations. So I'm going to come down into a open hip position. So I'm going to go as low as I can, keeping the hip open, so not sticking the butt backwards. So that's why I'm filming side on, so you can see that. So I'm trying to keep up as much as I can. So there, I'm going to go for about a 10-second count once I get to that position. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I'm going to use the steps. I'm going to put my hand there. Now, if you're not so flexible, use a higher box. If you're more flexible, go straight to the floor. So I'm going to close the hip now and get as low as I can. Not going back to the straddle, but I'm actually closing the hip a little bit. So again, 10-second count there. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to try and push my hip as far forwards as I can. 1, and try and get upright. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I'm going to come back out. So that would be 1 set. I'm going to do 3 of those. I'll film my next one from the front so you see what that looks like there. So it's going between open hip and closed hip. So I'm going to try and do this one without the steps. But if you are higher, definitely use a box or steps, because if not, you really struggle to get into that open hip position. Okay, so there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Closed hip. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now pushing that hip forwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So good rest, walk around in between. So do as many of those individual movements as you want to do, and then we'll go back and check that swim through position at the end. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if we can improve on that starting position. So I'm going to go on a pike first. So as deep as I can there. Trying to get chest towards the knees, head towards the toes, flat back as best I can. Okay, now I'm just going to put my hands into the middle and I'm going to open up. It's a little bit hard on this floor because it's so rough. I'm going to pull through. This is where I'm going to start to go towards middle splits. Deep pancake. Okay, now I'm getting close to that middle split position, trying to turn the feet over, keep the hips towards the floor. So it's close to your pancake middle split now. Spend a little bit of time there. And then this bit, which is super hard on the concrete. Slide outwards. Yeah. So mimicking that press handstand, we can do it on our back. With this one, I'm trying to keep the feet as close to the floor as possible. And then finally, just check that press handstand. Obviously, if you don't have one, you're not going to be able to do this, or you could do a press drill up against the wall. So trying to make it as compressed as I can. So that's a great way to approach or assess the mobility needed for the press handstand. Now, obviously, if you have a weak area in there where you're just super tight on it, you're going to have to break it down a little bit more and do some individual movements depending on where you're at with the hamstrings, with the adductors, in that forward fold position, in that straddle position, and then in the middle split position. And ideally, you should constantly be working towards each of those things, but pick out the ones that you need to work on the most and focus on that area. Thumbs up and subscribe would be appreciated. And if you could stick any comments or message me if you have any feedback or requests for any future videos. Speak to you next time, guys. Thank you.